Hello and welcome to the 23rd Annual Garden State Film Festival. My name is Emily DeSimone, and today I have with me director, writer, producer, and narrator Michael Hussein of the documentary The Waiting Game. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you today?
I'm doing great for having me.
You're very welcome. Michael, could you tell our live viewers a bit about your documentary?
Absolutely. The Waiting Game is a documentary that on its surface is it looks like a sports film. It's about this rival league to the NBA called the ABA that existed for 9 years, from 1967 to 1976, and then the two leagues combined. But much of what the NBA is today, if you're a basketball fan, really doesn't come from the NBA's own origins. The NBA's origin story is actually the ABA. And the pace of play, the three-point shot, the slam dunk contest, player fashion, entertainment, halftime shows, all of that was innovated in the ABA and then brought into the NBA when the two leagues combined. And so it's a cool story about this retro renegade league that a lot of people, if you're of a certain age, don't know existed. And for people who do know that it existed, there's a lot of warm memories behind it. They played with a red, white, and blue ball, as you can kind of see in the poster behind me. But the story has another facet, which is after the merger of the two leagues, the ABA players thought that they had signed on for full benefits, retirement package, health care, and all those sorts of things. And then flash forward 20 years later, 30 years later, they're calling the NBA to say, hey, how do I get my pension started? And the NBA is going back to them and saying, you don't have a pension. And so there was this sense of a broken promise, of a deal gone bad. And the players, some of them did fine. Some of them actually went into the NBA and did fine. But others really struggled. There were people who, couldn't make their rent payment, were getting evicted, couldn't afford life-saving medicines. Really sad stories, especially when someone is reaching their 70s and 80s. And so there was a little not-for-profit that was formed called the Dropping Dimes Foundation. 3 people that was specifically just going to help these ABA legends with some financial resources. But one of the guys who co-founded the Dropping Dimes Foundation, he was a lawyer. And so he started going back into all the documentation from 1976, trying to figure out how could these guys who had so much to do with creating the value of the NBA, who were the elite athletes of their time, Olympic level athletes, how could they be in this position? And so he wound up going on this legal journey, and the Dropping Dimes as an organization became really the sole advocate for these ABA players. And their sort of David versus Goliath negotiations, battle, whatever you want to call it, with the NBA is what the story ultimately becomes. It's a sports story on the surface, and it's a social justice, human dignity story at its heart.
Okay, that is an awesome message. I do apologize. The sun is messed up all of my lighting, but
That's all right.
with that, how did you get involved in this documentary? What inspired, this wheel to start turning for you to make this, journey and put it all together?
Yeah, I met the lawyer, the guy who had co-founded the not-for-profit, and just by chance. And he started telling me that what Dropping Dimes was, and that he thought actually they'd been negotiating with the NBA at that point for well over a year. And he thought they were really close, like within weeks. So I thought it was a short. I thought, well, this will be an interesting short, right? That moment when you get this, they were trying to get a benefits package. When you get this from the NBA, well, that'll be a great feel-good story, and it's a 10-minute film. And he agreed to let us follow those few weeks. And then the moment came when when it was supposed to happen. It didn't happen, and then the NBA said it's just a month away. There's cross the T's, dot the I's. There's just a couple little things. Month goes by, nothing happens, and so what started off as this kind of feel good story, the longer it went on, months and months and months, it kind of became a tragedy because several of these ABA players became sick, a couple died, and all without benefits or help. And the indignity was palpable, and the tension and the frustration of the people at Dropping Dimes who thought that they had achieved something that was really going to benefit these guys. And it just kept going and kept going. That's how it became this feature-length documentary.
Wow. And if I may ask, I would love to know a bit about your background in film work for our live audience.
Sure. I've been doing documentaries for 30 years. I really started off, there was a series on A&E called American Justice, so criminal justice crime stories. And there were three of us at a tiny little company in Chicago that helped launch that series for A&E, and it became a really long-running series for A&E, like ran for 13 or 14 years. So I kind of cut my teeth doing that, and then I transitioned. I started working with ESPN a lot, and then A&E's biography. And once you have done some work like that, it's easier to get the other work. It's the old catch-22 in filmmaking, right? We won't hire you unless you have experience, but I can't get experience unless you hire me, sort of thing. So I was fortunate to be able to get my start on American Justice, and then have been chasing documentaries, which have been my love all that time.
So, with all of these years of experience for you, how was this documentary maybe different than what you've done before, or what was this process like for you?
It was different in that it was sometimes when you're doing documentaries or biographies or things like that, it's the story's finished. It's a historical perspective on something. This was there was a little bit of a history piece, which is this league that existed, and you have to talk about all the great players and the impact and things like that. So that part was like what I had experienced before, but the follow doc, which is almost verite which is the second half of the film as this battle to get recognition is unfolding. Combining those two genres into one film was unique for me.
What would you say was, your favorite part of this process? And did you have a least favorite part of the process of the waiting game?
I guess the favorite part is there is a somewhat happy ending. I'm not going to give it away, but and so that is something that it was nice to see, because I met a lot of the players. I certainly met all the people within Dropping Dimes who were trying to achieve this for the players. And I learned a lot about the ABA and its impact. And so that part was great. I think the difficult part is something that any filmmaker who's watching can understand, is that the distribution game is tricky, right? Streaming is not sure what it is at this moment. You got to really hustle on a lot of different fronts. So we're pitching streaming for distribution, but we're also doing community screening. So we're taking the film to all the ABA cities. So I'm in Indianapolis, Indiana, where there was the 4 teams from the ABA went into the NBA, and they're still there. So the Indiana Pacers is one of them. So we did it in Indianapolis. We're going to Louisville next month. They had a team. We'll go to Denver, San Antonio, Salt Lake City. And then, you know, the New Jersey, New York area, because the New Jersey had a franchise, and probably the most popular player to ever come out of the ABA was a guy named Dr. J. Julius Erving. And he was Michael Jordan before Michael Jordan. He was
Okay.
just an extraordinarily transformational player. He just looked different on the court. He was that guy.
So, okay, so I have some of your future intention with this documentary. What are your hopes in doing this, bringing it around the country?
Well, I said it was a partially happy ending, and it
Yes.
is, but that means it's partially not happy. And so I think the goal is to see if we can right wrong, what I would consider. There's just a little more work that can be done, and it's important work. And so the end of the film really goes into that. And I think I would love for these ABA players who are, maybe there's a few left that are in their 60s, but mostly they're in their 70s and 80s, for those guys to get the recognition that they deserve. You know, they set the table, and this is sort of almost a paraphrase of a quote within the film. They set the table for which you have guys now that are making 30, 40, $50 million a year. And these guys are struggling just to get by. So there's an inequity there. And I think it's largely driven by the fact that people don't realize that it exists. And so if we can pierce the bubble, make people aware, I think it's a very fixable problem. I think there's good hearts at the NBA and the NBA Players Association that want this to be right. I just don't think they know that it's really not right yet.
I mean, as someone who kind of sits on the outside of the sports industry, I didn't even know about any of this. So it's very eye-opening to get to hear about all of these. One, to hear about this league, and then to see and hear what it is that has been the aftermath. It's also quite shocking as well, like to sit here and listen that these people haven't been properly compensated for, I'm assuming, years of work. So I'm very intrigued and interested.
Well, good. I hope
Able to see this. Absolutely. With that said, you know, congratulations on being accepted into the film festival. How did you find the Garden State Film Festival?
I've known about Garden State, and just like we're taking the film to ABA cities, Garden State, you know, New Jersey had a team, and so it makes sense to try and target film festivals that you know, people may remember Dr. J, who's in the film. Or, you know, I mean, guys like Bob Costas, who's a legendary broadcaster, he's done Olympics and World Series and everything. He got his start calling games in the ABA. People, certain segment of people will remember those guys.
Okay, I feel like I recognize hearing Dr. J, which I'm assuming would be in relation to this Dr. J.
It has to be. He's the only Dr.
Media.
There's no other Dr.
Music. J. So that's actually really cool to have that connection, to be able to make that. So, you know, thank you so much, Michael, for joining me today. We have just a little bit of time left, and I would love to ask you, you know, with your years of experience, what is some advice that you would give someone who's just coming into, you know, the industry that you've been working for so long now, maybe something that you would have loved to have heard at the time yourself?
Do it. Just get out and make the films. You have in your pocket a camera that's good enough to do what I couldn't do 30 years ago. So get out and make films, make shorts. You can learn. It's not that film schools don't have value. They do, but not as much as just the trial and error attempts and failures and successes going out and making film.
Okay. Well, thank you so much again for joining me today, you guys. You can see the documentary, The Waiting Game, at the Asbury on Saturday, March 29th at 2:45 p.m. Michael, again, it has been such a pleasure to speak with you today. Will I be seeing you at the festival?
Yes, planning to come.
Awesome. I will see you there. Well, guys, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Emily.